Hello everyone, welcome, konnichiwa. We're continuing on with our kanji damage website review. As I mentioned in my last video, which I'd really check out first before watching this one. We're just going to be going to the kanji damage website, learning how it's all put together, and then how to effectively use it to learn kanji. I do online lessons. You can contact me through the details you see on screen now, and I'll run through this website with you if that's what you want to do. But otherwise, I teach Japanese of all levels. So for exam prep, if you want to travel and speak Japanese, doesn't matter. If you want to learn Japanese, contact me and we can go through online lessons or face-to-face lessons if you're in Perth. So last video, we looked at the introduction and the kanji facts part to get some background on kanji itself, kind of why textbooks are not, kanji textbooks are generally not very good, and the problems that they just kind of create, and then how this website can help solve a lot of those problems, which I think it actually does pretty effectively. So now we're on the how to actually use the website. We're actually going to work out what's going on here. So we've got a typical kanji entry here. Now, this is not actually what the website looks like, but it's pretty similar. So this one, we see it's 242. This number is kind of meaningless, but it just means you've learned 241 before it. And we see we're learning the kanji for bury, okay, to bury something. Now we've got a whole bunch of things. First, we've got the sequence number, just mentioned that. We've got the flag. Now, the flag he'll explain in a second, but this just means it's a new kanji. We've got the actual kanji itself, the English keyword, which is obviously very important to remember first. The breakdown, so kind of the radicals. The Onyomi, which we'll talk about in a sec, but this one is mai. Now the mnemonic, so I buried my family in the earth, the same village we were born, so obviously we can see where the mai is coming from, and the bury is underlined to tell you that that's the English meaning. So the capitals are the Onyomi, and that is that. Description, sometimes he has one, sometimes he doesn't. We have the kunyomis, okay, so these always come next, and these are the kind of very standard readings. And he'll also put the particles here. Okay, so here we've got the difference between a transitive and an intransitive verb. So we have o and ga. We'll also have stars here. So it's out of 5 stars. 5 stars means it's very useful. 2 or 1, obviously not as useful. And we have the jukugo. Now this word just means a compound word. So this is just going to show what are the kind of the compound words that you should learn. And this is a really big issue in kanji textbooks. They'll teach you compound words which you're never ever going to use. So this one, he tries not to do that, but we see even this one is a 1 star, so it's not particularly common, but still it gets used in Japanese. So we have this one, and he has kind of just the English meaning of it, and then also kind of a context sentence of how it would be used, and then the breakdown itself, so just to help you remember it. And then this section, which I really like, is the lookalikes. And this one is a good example where we have 2 which are very, very similar. Really, the only difference is this stroke up here. We have reason and king. And so it's kind of showing you the bit in the brackets. And this looks a little bit different on the actual website. I think this must be an older version of what the website used to look like. But he'll actually show you the radicals, which will help you remember. And then we've got a mnemonic, which combines both. So we see reason, buried, king, and earth, so both of the kanji are in the mnemonic to help you remember the difference between the 2. Sometimes he has 3 separate sentences if there's 3 kanji, but anyway, we'll look at it and I'll work it out from there. Okay, so I've basically mentioned all this stuff, but it's going to go through a bit more detail now. So they're in a rad sequence, obviously a bit of a pun here with radicals, and so he's going to say, well, every 10 kanji we're going to do a new radical or a new kanji, and then we're going to get that flag. Okay, this Imperial Navy flag. Now, he mentions there's going to be a unique English keyword, and we talked about this right at the end of the kind of part 1 in this series, where we kind of had this issue of, you know, we've got 3 here, hanasu, shaberu, and iu, and a lot of people will just, you know, a lot of textbooks, I should say, will translate this all as say. Okay, and this doesn't really help you much because there is a nuance between these words, and we have this nuance in English as well. So, you know, he says iu is more to say, hanasu is to kind of converse with someone. I guess there should be not conversation, but converse, or anyway, exchange ideas kind of thing. and shaberu is to speak or to chat. All right, so we actually have a difference there. And he does a very good job of capturing that meaning, I would say. And he, again, because he gives context, he'll show you these in context. Now, this is one of the best parts, I would say, about this website. And this is the problem I always have with kanji. You would kind of remember the main part of the kanji, especially if what we're dealing with, what I call symbolic radicals, which we'll see in a second what these symbolic radicals are. And we did discuss this last video as well. But I would remember the symbolic radical, and then I would just kind of be like, then there's kind of other stuff. And I would always forget what that other stuff was, or I would forget an element, okay? But this website, the whole point of it is to stop that issue, to give you a mnemonic that you can say to yourself, and then that'll give you every single part of the kanji. And he also does that, as we saw last video, by creating, I guess, he kind of invents new radicals. If that's a good way to say it, I guess. But what I think we called, I can't remember the word now, it was phenomes or something. I can't remember, but anyway, I mentioned it last video. So every single part will be accounted for. Okay, and then if we forget those radicals, or the symbolic radicals, or the kind of kanji damage created radicals, we can just click on it and go back and then look at it again. And the other thing is, the arrangement of these radicals and the parts of the kanji is totally arbitrary. And this is something that, again, I wish I'd been taught when I started off with Japanese. So it's just kind of saying it's not really important what order they are. Just like when we have a word like cat, it's kind of silly to ask, why is the C first and not the T first? It's like, well, that would just be a different word. So it's just kind of arbitrary. And then we also see that when we have these radicals, or even a full kanji, which is inside another kanji, that kanji can, not always, but can lose its original meaning. So that's also kind of the other thing we have to keep in mind. Onyomi. Now, again, another kind of feature of this website is he'll put the onyomi, but also make a mnemonic for it. So he kind of treats the onyomi like a radical itself. Now, he doesn't just kind of give you it and then you have to remember it, but he kind of makes English words out of it. So this sho becomes sho, ka becomes ka. All right, so again, we can incorporate that into the mnemonic, right? We can show something, or, this is my car, whatever it may be. But in this instance, we said umeru. Right here, it's mai. So then he changes it to my. Changes it to my, and then we can incorporate it into a mnemonic. Which I can't remember what he said it was. I bury my family in the earth of the same village where we were born. Okay, so we can see where that my is coming into it. And then we have some long and short ones. So what he does is comes up with other kind of acronyms, I guess, to help remember this. So SHU or SHO will be smell his odor, smell her underpants. Okay, and again, he'll incorporate this into the mnemonic. And there's a whole list of them, which we'll check out later. Okay, I just already mentioned this. Okay, and we have usefulness. Now he's gotten rid of a lot of Joyo and JLPT. So again, and I mentioned this right at the very beginning of the first video, but this is not really a resource that you can solely use to do well in JLPT or to learn all the Joyo kanji. It will, though, help you learn kanji much more effectively, so that you're much more effective with your kanji study. And trust me, if you knew, there's about 1700 kanji on here. If you know 1700 kanji, you know a lot of kanji. You can read a lot of things. So he's kind of saying that he's not interested in taking JLPT. All right, so now we have stroke number, and notice this is empty because he just doesn't care about this. He doesn't care about stroke order, and he doesn't care about stroke number. If you can memorize the mnemonic properly, the stroke order and stroke number is useless. Again, you need to know it if you're going to take what's called the Kanji Kente. This is different from the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken. This is a kanji exam, basically meant for Japanese people. And in there, they will test you on stroke order and all that stuff, but that's not a problem for memorizing kanji, especially if you follow this technique. Tags. This is actually a really interesting part of this website. I often come this website just to look at tags sometimes. So he's got a whole bunch, and the little warning labels that tell you all types of things. So, is it only used in formal occasions? Is it got a weird reading which you wouldn't expect? We'll start a fight. This is actually a tag I was reading about last night. Basically, there's all these words in Japanese that are kind of slang, or there's kind of historical baggage associated with them. So if you just kind of bring them up in kind of random conversations, you might cause some social awkwardness at least. I don't think many people will fight you over that, but perhaps they could. And hiragana, this happens a lot. There is kanji for lots of words in Japanese that even really basic words you think, why can't Japanese people write this? Just like, they just never get written in kanji and you never see them. Or if you do see them, it was like 15 years ago and you've forgotten them. So tags will really tell you all about that. This FR1 is another funny one I was reading today. This stands for fucked roots. And it's basically like you'll have some kanji, which when you kind of look at their individual elements, like what? The one, and before I even knew this about this tag, the one of the examples I used to give of this is the word chikan, which is it's the word for people who are on trains, like the perverts who are on trains who kind of touch generally women during the peak hour train. It's kind of this weird social phenomenon you have in Japan. And so the kan, the chikan, is actually the same kan from kanji. What we're looking at kanji right now, it's the same kan, and that kan means China. So I always used to ask Japanese people, like, why is this chikan word using this word, this kanji? What are you saying about Chinese people? And I always just used to get hammered. It's like, oh well, it's got nothing to do with that, we're just using it because of the sound. But it's kind of bizarre, I'll say that. But anyway, those tags are very interesting to check out. Description, again, nuances, some pictures, something like that. Kunyomi, so again, we talked about this in our first video, but it's really when the kanji is by itself. And this is often, verbs, adjectives, this kind of thing, very common. And really, we're going to have an asterisk, which shows us, because we're going to have hokurigana a lot of times when we have kunyomi. So the star just says, well, this ta is this part of the kanji, and then next, outside the kanji is the beru part. Weird particles will also be written, or as the default, so generally it's not written, but of course this is generally only for verbs. And we've also got this interesting feature in Japanese, really handy actually, which is where some nouns can act as verbs in Japanese. So the example he uses here is shoben, and shoben suru, this means to take a pee, like to pee. Whereas shoben, just by itself, is a noun. It just means, he says pee-pee here, but it's urine. Okay, so you got that thing. I just want to point out, when I do my own lessons and I explain this concept, I don't use this word. I normally use the word benkyo. Okay, so benkyo suru, to study. The word just benkyo is study. All right, it's just a noun. Usefulness, so these are the star rating, tag for weirdness, this kind of stuff. Jukugo, compound words. And again, this is a really big issue. Textbooks teach you these jukugo, which you're just never ever going to use. They're just so rare and so silly. Why would you ever need to know them? So this is kind of what he says, 5 stars, and then you kind of go, well, is it really worth learning this? Okay, and he won't even list a lot of things. You could look these up in the dictionary and get all these different results, but if you can't really use it in Japanese, and there is other stuff which you can use and you're not learning, it seems kind of a waste of time. Okay, now the kanji breakdown, we have a jukugo breakdown. This is that thing where he kind of showed that umiawaseru one. Just kind of says, why is it that these two go together? Well, we look at the meanings of both and kind of say why is, that's why they go together. I'm not sure it really helps this much. I mean, if you, this is the problem I have a lot of time where I go, is it X, Y? Is this kanji go first or is the other kanji go first? And this again comes up in the kanji kente, and you actually have words to classify kanji to kind of say, do you read it from top to bottom or bottom to top, or is the top one meaning knock out the bottom one's meaning, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not really sure this is going to help with that problem, because you still have to remember the order, but perhaps the mnemonic that he has will. I mean, it can't really hurt, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't agree that it's going to get rid of the problem. Again, it's all hyperlinked. Lookalikes, I mentioned this is a great thing. We're going to look at this a little bit more, so I'm not going to bother talking about it. Mnemonics as well. Okay. So what about if we have this issue where we're starting on our journey of using this website, but we're reading something and we come across some kanji we're not aware of. Well, like I pointed out before, we've got the search box up here, so we can just use that. But there's many things that we can do. So really the key to getting good at Japanese is we can't rely on the dictionary, particularly electronic dictionaries, as a crutch, because you're not going to be engaging the brain much if you always just look up answers. You're not going to remember it. So we'll do some kind of simple examples, and then we'll see that there's some many techniques we can use. So for example, we look at this guy and we're like, which one is it? And I would say that probably this website is going to cause this issue a lot, because you're going to look at kanji which are kind of common. They look common to each other, and you're just going to learn them kind of close together, and then you can't remember which one is which. But you can't remember if it's this guy, which is basically read as nagai, or this guy, which is, I guess, oyogu in this instance. Okay, and we see it's the same thing, except oyogu has what's called sansui on the left. It's got the water radical on the left. And so you're going, well, by context, I mean, it's probably going to be, if it's about the ocean, you know what you're already reading, you're probably going to notice that this is to swim. Okay, so that's kind of a simple example. What else can we do? Well, we can kind of look at this guy, and again, if you use the techniques in this website, you will recognize this left-hand side as being, it's called gyo nimmen in Japanese, but it's the going man radical. And then we have sun on the top, and then this guy is temple, I believe, on the bottom, this radical, the temple radical. And so you kind of just read them all off. You go sun, temple, go, sun, temple. And then if you've already learnt the mnemonic from this website, it's this one. You know, you go to the temple of the sun god to obtain virtue, and the obtain part is the meaning of the kanji, right? Eru. Now I do this all the time using this website. It's a really good way to get the meaning of a kanji that you can't remember. And I've got to tell you, before this method, I had a kind of a similar method to this, but sometimes you just can't remember, and then you've got no way to jog your own memory. So yeah, it's quite good. I gave the example of yorokobu, okay, which is there's like a mean samurai, and you make him happy by throwing beans in his mouth. Okay, so then I go, okay, samurai, bean, mouth. Okay, and then it means yorokobu. All right, now I already knew what yorokobu meant, so that part I didn't have to worry about so much, but writing it is what my problem is, and that mnemonics have solved that problem, I would say, now permanently. We'll see, I guess. Okay, and then just like all study of kanji, whenever you're a bit rusty or you can't quite remember, and then you work out what it is, you want to write it quite a few times, okay, as much as possible. Now, when we're talking about JLPT study in particular, especially the higher levels of JLPT, you're not, well, in any level of JLPT, you're not asked to write kanji, so you don't have to really focus on this. But of course, if you can write it, you're going to be able to read it and understand it a lot better. Okay, so what if none of these had worked? What if you haven't done it yet? What else can we do? Well, you want to think of another jukugo that uses the same kanji. Now this is, again, we're starting to get into a very low percentage in success, but this can work, and like he says, it's a great feeling. So what do I mean by this? So just say we get this kanji, and you can't read the first one, but you can read the second one. This is kind of an introductory kanji I remember I learned quite early on, but this one is a bit more advanced. And you know that this is shitsu, so you're like, okay, it's something shitsu, I have no idea what it is. So you're going to go, well, where have I seen this guy before? Where have I seen this kanji? And then maybe, and again, this point where you're like trying to remember is hard to do, but perhaps you're like, you know, is it art, geijutsu? No. And then somehow this, you know, they kind of jump to sakuhin, okay, artworks, all right, and then you remember sakuhin, okay, just say you remember this word, again, very low percentage, and then you go, oh, well, so hinshitsu, okay, and then at least you can kind of look it up at that point, because you've tried to engage your brain at least at a point. Okay, the next thing is we want to check for our symbolic radicals. Again, I explained this in the first video, so I would go back and rewatch that if you're not sure. But we have things like this, so kuchi, ki, hi, and they have meaning, okay? So we can kind of go off there. This is a really interesting point that, again, I kind of like knew it in my head, but I never really put it into words. So when we've got radicals on the left-hand side, they will tend to be the symbolic ones. So these kind of guys, where they will continue to hold their meaning even as radicals. Whereas the right side radicals are more likely to be strong. And what does he mean by strong? Well, they're going to be read as an onyomi, and that means that all the kanji which have that right-hand side in common, most of the time are going to be read with that same onyomi. So the JLPT book I have, the So Matome book, this is how it groups up kanji to help you cram lots and lots of kanji by looking at all the same onyomi guys together. I think it's like the first 2 or 3 weeks of that kanji program is all like that. And that's the main reason I bought that book, actually. Okay, at this point, if you still don't know the word, not much to do. You just have to look it up. And then we have this issue, and this is not, I mean, it says only available in Japanese. I'm not sure this is true. I mean, English is the same. If you can't spell a word, it makes it kind of hard to look up in the dictionary. So I would say both languages have this issue. And I'm sure that every other language kind of has this issue. So what if we can't remember? Well, if we can look at the kanji and remember a different reading of it, especially if we go electronic dictionary, we can then find it. So for example, if there's a kurigana, we'll have to use the kunyomi. And if the jukugo is 3 more characters long, maybe 2 words of that can be looked up instead of 3. So there can be some prefixes, and we'll look at these a bit later, but you know, really, this is when you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, so it's a bit hard. Again, is it a short vowel or long vowel? Just remember the mnemonic, so the smell, her, odors, someone, things like this. Show me your bart or so many barts, something like this. Again, you'd have to know the mnemonic from this Kanji Damage website to get there, but it's something worth thinking about. And this is just restating what we just looked at, which is this bit here, okay, or this bit. Next thing is, if we're really still not getting it, we also have to remember that kanji itself, when we have 2, as in a jukugo, the second one can take a dakuon, or the maru problem, okay? So it's going to change sounds with what are called tentens or dakutens. So we'll say it's either ha, ba, pa, or sha, or ja. So the example he gives is this one. It's normally pronounced as sha, and this really just means a person. And this is, as an onyomi anyways, pronounced as hon. But when we've got ninja, you know, that's using this sha kanji in the second position, that's the important part, it's going to change to a ja rather than a sha. And this guy, this will become ippon, all right? So it's going to change. This is not so much a big deal. I think once you've been exposed to kanji for a while, this becomes kind of second nature for you to try this. Now this is an interesting point. It's kind of hard to say ninsha or ichihon apparently for Japanese people, and I always thought this is kind of a weak reason. Sometimes it definitely does make sense. Like the one I like is gakko for school, because otherwise it'd be gakko. I can kind of see how that's a little bit harder to pronounce than gakko, but I mean, he makes a good point here, saying, you know, God forbid that kanji be difficult. Let's invent all these new syllables to cut down difficulty. And he makes a good point in arbitrary places, okay? Having said that, you do kind of get a feel for the logic eventually, but so you can just basically try that. Now, just say after, you know, I don't know how many techniques he just gave then. It looks like about 5 or 6 or 7 techniques he gave. You can't stop there. If you do use one of these techniques to get the kanji out, again, you've got to write it out. Put it in your flashcards. I have a Google Doc that I have open, and I just add, it's my word list, and I just add it in. So you want to jump on that opportunity to really create those neural connections. Okay. Now these are all just some basic things. I've talked about these in other kanji videos. You want to be writing it out while repeating the names of the radicals, and again, repeating the mnemonic, okay? You want to be doing both. Okay, earth, rifle, mouth, you know, it's going to help you remember. Flashcards, I'm not really going to go into this. I think he gives some good tips here, but really just putting it in your flashcards. And this technique I wouldn't really recommend, so I'm not going to go through it, but I think it's just adding an extra level of abstraction, which is not that good. Okay. So let's get started. It took us a while to get here, but let's actually look at how to do it. So, you can get here just by clicking on Kanji. All right, and we see that this is the list. So we go to the first one. Okay, now this is not really that surprising, to be honest, that 1 is the first kanji. Pretty much every kanji program ever done has done it. But we'll see that, we've got our flag, which is telling us that it's a new one. It's obviously number 1. We see it's 1 stroke, and again we can click on these tags. So I don't even know what they are. PK, a primary kanji. All right, what else do we say? A proper noun. Duh. Looks like what it represents. Okay, so that's all what that is going on about. Now we've got a picture here. They don't all have pictures, but this is Easy E. If you guys have seen Straight Outta Compton, good film by the way. But we've got a picture to help us remember it. So we see here the reading is ichi or itsu. These are the 2 most common ones. And we say that Easy E. All right, so itsu is easy. Okay, it's going to number 1 on the charts. All right, so again, our green corresponds with this green, and our orange corresponds with this orange. And we've got our mnemonic, which is nothing. Okay, really, because it's this guy. We don't really need anything else. Now Onyomi, there's really only hitotsu. It's probably the best one, but we'll see that there's like hitori, so really it's hito followed by something different. This is okurigana, really, if you want to think about it that way. And we have our common words. Again, with the breakdown, we see that these are all 5 stars, very common words. Okay, and then we see, we haven't done these yet, but we're going to see. Now, the blue represents kind of either a kanji or, yeah, let's just say that. It represents a kanji, whereas these black ones are radicals. And these are generally radicals that he has made himself, okay? So, Japanese people are not going to know what you're talking about when you say decapitated cow. But this is what he is called the radical. So this is a moo cow, and then this guy together, it makes this guy. All right. So we can see it's got to use it quite a lot. Of course, it's quite a fundamental one. And we see some synonyms. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch here, but we won't go through those right now. So then basically you spend a few minutes doing that. And if you really wanted to get into it, I would even write out this in English. But I would write it out about 10 times and make a flashcard out of it. Next, number 2. And we've got all the same stuff, no picture this time. Ni, as in Vince Neil, has 2 chins. Now I don't know who Vince Neil is, but I guess that could be part of your study. I don't think this is too hard, really, just remember Ni. These kanji were the least of my problems. Go up to 3. All right, and then we move away. Now, most kanji programs would probably keep going all the way up to 10 even. But here, it's like, no, we're dealing with radicals, so let's get into another fundamental radical. And you might look at this guy and go, well, some people, if you've got some basic kanji knowledge, you probably haven't even heard of this kanji before. It's not super common. And what words? Well, we've got kanryo, ryokai, shuryo. These are not common words. We see, this is 0 stars. I'm not sure I agree with that. It would probably be a bit more than that. You can have like shuryo, jikan, and all that kind of stuff. But ryokai, yeah, kind of common. It's a military phrase, but it gets used a lot when you message people, for example. And kanryo, all right, very kind of common word to finish something, kind of similar to shuryo. So we see that this is not super useful, but where is it? It's going to get used. We already see we're building up lookalikes, even though we haven't looked at these yet. Okay, so where are we going next? Well, we're going to combine those 2 we just saw. So the ryo and ichi. Okay, going to put them together. Yeah, so you can use kodomo as this keyword. Okay, so we're just going to keep going like this. There's no onyomi for this, shi. But really, how did I used to remember that if there's no mnemonic for it? Oh, sorry, no, there's one. Yeah, the poor child, she has lived a total of 1 year. Again, we got red referring back to the old radical components, green to the actual kanji itself, and shi for the onyomi mnemonic. Okay, so it just kind of keeps going up like this. Now this is what I was talking about with the lookalike sentences. We have three separate sentences for 3 separate kanji. So, you know, if you want to remember a child, because maybe you just remember, by the way, he calls it the broken coat hanger. Yeah, it's the broken coat hanger, which is totally useless. And, you know, so, but you kind of go, okay, I know it's a broken coat hanger, but which one is which? I go, okay, a child is 1 year old. Okay, yeah, child 1. Yep. The complete kanji is complete even without the 1 radical. Okay, so again, we're having to think of negatives here, and then we kind of go, ah, this guy, it's katakana ma on the top. Okay, so mama was around before the baby. All right, we get this, and then again, we have all these different kanji here. Now, these don't have any link to each other at all. All right, and that's basically it. That's basically just kind of keep going up and just do little bits at a time. Now there's also a bit where he arranges all the radicals. Okay, and they're kind of yeah. A lot of these, you can see in most of these, there's a lot of ones he's made, but most of them are not. And yeah, most of the time they'll lose their radicals. And like I said, the tags, this is another interesting thing to go through. The abu one was kind of funny. So this is short for abunai because it's like, you know, one of these things, okay? So yeah, I would definitely have a look through these because it can be very helpful. Okay, that's about it, I think. That's really everything I think I can teach you about the website. Yeah, there's dupes and all these appendix and all that you can look through as well. There's also a whole listing of the kanji. But really there's not much to it apart from that. Then it's just basically working through the website. Now I hope this series helped you. I mean, I just, like I saw in part 1, I just wish I'd had this website when I started kanji. And it might seem kind of a radical, no pun intended, way to learn kanji. But speaking as someone who, I mean, I think I've got a pretty good handle on kanji. I'm definitely not perfect, and I don't know every single kanji ever, but you know, I can read a lot of stuff and I can read it correctly. And I mean, I've taken the kanji kente. I didn't pass it, but this is a very difficult exam, and I got pretty close to passing, to be honest. So I know a lot about kanji, and with all my experience, when I look at a website like this, I'm just thinking, I can't believe this kind of is not the norm for learning kanji. It really should be. So if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate a like or a comment on the video. I'm trying to make content like this which can appeal to beginners, really, because getting started with Japanese is quite tricky, but using the right resources can really help. So I'd appreciate any feedback you guys have on this. And like I said in the first video, on the main part of the website, there is a donate button. And I would really recommend you donate to this if you found this website helpful in even just a short way, because really think of it as like an investment in your own education. It's $10 or $20 worth you learning something which has saved you hours and hours of time. I think that's a fair deal. So I would just encourage you to donate, but you know, you don't have to. Okay, that's it from me. I'll see you next time. Next, we're going to be looking at some other good kanji websites and kanji learning materials. So stay tuned, and I'll see you guys later.